The sky twists into a pixelated tornado as villagers frantically build roller coasters for cows. Because in this blocky world, livestock now rule the economy and demand thrill rides or instant mud pie taxes. Wooden tracks spool across emerald grasslands while the cows, wearing bored expressions and suspiciously well-crafted hats, line up with patience that suspiciously borders on existential dread. Nearby, villagers wielding stone pickaxes tap dance nervously, balancing carts on rails as if the future of their entire pixelated realm depended on these bumpy bovine chariots. Then, bursting through the chaos like a green hurricane in a top hat, a creeper storms the town square. "I am your new mayor," he announces, voice crackling like gunpowder. Everyone freezes. The sun momentarily glitches out, and mysterious music, something between a circus march and a fight song, begins to play. Expect chaos, coin, and mandatory dance battles at dawn. This is no ordinary day in Minecraft. This is the moment the villagers decided to rewrite the blocky rulebook. And maybe, just maybe, declare war on the Ender Dragon's empire. Welcome to a world gone sideways. The quaint routine of mining, farming, and wandering through pixel forests just exploded into absurdity. The creeper, named Mayor Sizzle, strutted across the cobblestone like he owned it. Not surprising, since he literally claims to own the market post-taxation of redstone and emeralds. Around him, a crowd of villagers murmured and blinked. Some sharpened pitchforks, others kept building roller coaster loops for their bovine feudal lords who, truth be told, still hadn't made up their minds about whether they liked the new mayor. It was a scene ripe with tension, confusion, and the kind of reckless optimism only found when a creeper with a hat demands strict civic festivities. Now, let's pause on one particular villager, Zedric, the usually unassuming librarian with a penchant for enchanted books and suspiciously brightly colored robes that screamed, "Show me something shiny." Zedric adjusted his thick square glasses and eyed the mayor from a safe distance. His usual calm was shattered by visions of dragon fire mixed with the ridiculous requirement to practice your dance moves before sunrise. Zedric's fingers twitched nervously on a dusty tome titled Politics for Villagers. A guide, kind of. He'd read that thing cover to cover, twice, and yet nothing prepared him for being caught between apocalypse and absurd performers' paradise. The atmosphere was electric. Blocks of cobblestone squares, wooden planks, and swaying wheat fields shimmered in a twilight glow as the villagers debated the implications of Mayor Sizzle's announcement. Mandatory dance battles, grumbled old man Hob, who hadn't danced since the great zombie invasion of 17. "I am too old for this," he muttered, hobbling off with a racket of his cane against stone steps, muttering cryptic nonsense about bad redstone wiring. The market stalls, once places of barter for potatoes and wool, now brimmed with bizarre goods. Enchanted disco balls, stacks of neonlit blocks carved from prismarine, and parrot feathers dyed in suspiciously bright shades that no bird in nature would ever wear. It was as if the village had been pulled halfway through a glitch into a cult of party ministers serving cows on golden thrones. Meanwhile, word spread fast. The carolers, led by a particularly grumpy bovine known sarcastically as Sir Mooington III, were plotting their own demands. They wanted bigger loops on the coasters, or perhaps just an annual tax waiver on mud pies. Their demands might seem trivial, but in a world where cows dictated economic fate with a hoof stomp, ignoring them meant instant collapse of the local economy and potentially more existential crisis for villagers who actually preferred mining over managing livestock labor unions. Sitting atop a makeshift throne, Sir Mooington wiggled his pixelated nose with a grunt that sent ripples of servile moos through the crowd. Zedric squinted at this bovine monarch and wondered if the end times were in fact a massive glitch in the game or just really, really bad roleplay. Yet, beneath this comedic chaos, an undercurrent simmered, a whisper of something heavier stirring in the digital pixels beyond the village's boundaries. The Ender Dragon. That massive purple-eyed tyrant that had until now ruled the skies of the End, the very domain where all heroics met their climaxes with fire and fury. What the villagers didn't know yet was that Mayor Sizzle's sudden rise wasn't random. No, it was a strategic pivot. The Creeper's brand of chaos and coin had a second objective: to unify the fragmented, often apathetic villagers to march on the Ender Dragon's empire. A pixelated imperial rule that had, for centuries, reigned unchallenged over their skies and nightmares. Suddenly, the narrative switched. As if pulled by an invisible minecart, the scene zoomed out to reveal a sprawling pixel universe, cracking into sectors. Floors of blocky cities, colossal caverns, and mysterious portals flickering with ethereal purple light. Toward the horizon, the End shimmered like a difficult boss fight waiting beyond the next dimension. From this vantage point, it was clear the villagers were small, but their ambition was not. Rumors echoed through banner advertisements pasted on walls. Because yes, even in Minecraft, there's guerrilla marketing. Join the Great Rebellion. Free wool for all who stand. No more dragon taxes. The message was clear. This was not going to be your grandmother's peaceful village anymore back in town square. Villagers huddled in confused excitement. Mayor Sizzle paced theatrically, occasionally exploding small puffs of harmless smoke for flair. His plan, half opaque, half ludicrous, was unfolding. He proposed forming dance battalions not just for morale, but to train agility and confuse enemy forces with unpredictable movement patterns. Villagers glanced at each other incredulously. "It's dance or die," quipped the mayor with a grin, patting his top hat. A young villager, barely out of apprentice status, rolled her eyes and whispered, "Or just die building on the mayor's demagogic momentum." Zedric found himself unexpectedly drafted into the newly minted Council of Curious Strategies. Their first order of business: designing battle codes disguised as dance rituals. To the untrained eye, villagers would appear just as confused performers, but every spin, shuffle, and clap was coded to relay tactical information using redstone-powered lanterns. A dazzling light show syncing with motion. Zedric stared at the dance manual the council handed him, which included cryptic notes like Step 4. The Hopper Hop, a move suspiciously reminiscent of unpaid courier runs he'd executed countless times across the village. Amidst the plan-making, a peculiar sight grabbed everyone's attention. A group of pigs outfitted in makeshift armor, marching seriously down the street in formation. They called themselves the Bacon Brigade. Their leader, a massively confident hog named Captain Snout, declared war drums would soon echo the land, or at least very loud oinks. Their motto: bring home the bacon and the glory. Captain Snout's helmet, a polished pumpkin shell with hand-drawn angry eyes, glinted in the twilight as the brigade paraded, much to the villagers' mixture of awe and incredulous laughter. The night deepened, but the village wasn't slowing down. Fires flickered against moonlit pixel skies as villagers gathered materials: iron, obsidian, enchanted wheat, and plotted. The roller coasters transformed from amusement rides into rapid transport routes for troops, while cows indulged in their thrill rides, uncaring of the chaos but crucially entertained enough not to tax the village too heavily. Somewhere behind the scenes, a redstone inventor named Tink toggled an experimental device he called the Echo Amplifier. Designed to broadcast dance instructions over vast distances using signal blocks. It was part mad science, part desperate hope. In a slapstick moment, a pumpkin-headed villager attempted a ritual dance only to crash spectacularly into a barrel of chickens, setting off an avalanche of feathers and squawks that left the entire group coughing and coughing amidst pixelated chaos. The mayor just laughed, smoke sparks curling upwards. Practice, people. The Ender Dragon won't know what hit him, unless it's a well-aimed mud pie. Then, as midnight edged close, Zedric found himself wandering alone to the edge of the village, where the pixelated trees parted to reveal a distant glowing end portal. barely stable and humming quietly like a sleeping beast. He placed a hand on its frame, feeling the cold, digital pulse beneath his fingers. The Ender Dragon's empire was no longer a distant myth. It was a looming, oppressive empire cast in shadows and purple fire. For the first time, the absurdity faded, replaced by a nervous pulse that thrummed in Zedric's square chest. What would it mean for a bunch of livestock-loving, dance-a-battling villagers to declare war on an empire that breathed chaos and ruled with terror? The question hung in the electric air like a rare item drop, fragile but priceless behind Zedric. The village slept uneasily, dreams filled with spinning coasters, somersaulting cows, and dance battles at dawn. Somewhere, Mayor Sizzle, green smoke curling off his hat, prepared his next eccentric proclamation. The war was coming, unorthodox and strange, ready to rewrite the pixelated codes of power forever. And so, the story begins with villagers who never wanted war suddenly choosing to fight, not just for survival, but for a surreal vision of freedom, chaos, and the ultimate dance-off against the Ender Dragon's empire. What could possibly go wrong? Or perhaps, what could possibly go right? Only the blocks know, and they're yet to be placed. Next time, we dive deeper into the strange new alliances forming beneath those blocky skies, and how the first dance skirmish might just become the greatest pixel showdown ever seen. But for now, watch the sky twist again, and remember, in Minecraft, even the quietest villagers can spark the wildest revolutions. The sun dawned like a giant pixelated ruby over the blocky horizon of Villagatopia, casting sharp shadows on cobblestone streets and turning the air into something that felt a little too bright, like a creeper had tried to flash a smile. The villagers, still nursing their shock from the Ender Dragon's latest midnight raid, gathered at the town square, their square noses twitching with determination beneath square hats. Among them was Gordy, the village's less-than-heroic blacksmith, whose mustachioed face betrayed a certain permanent state of mild confusion, perfect for igniting the chaos about to unfold. His trusty anvil clanged defiantly as he pounded uninspired iron swords while declaring, "If the dragon thinks we're just blockheads, it hasn't met Gordy. No one really knew how Gordy went from forging horseshoes to sparking a full-scale rebellion. But that clink of metal stirred a ticking clock in every villager's pixelated heart. Villagatopia wasn't just a peaceful biome anymore, it was a cauldron of fury just waiting to boil over. The villagers' answer to despair. The Great Uprising Roller Derby, an absolutely unexpected and ridiculous plan that somehow made sense only in their chaotic, blocky world. You see, the Ender Dragon's empire was not your usual tyrannical realm. It was an endless void, wrapped in a vortex of eyeball missiles and spiky purple tails, where Endermen scurried and the air shimmered like a bad glitch. But it lacked one important thing, a good sense of humor. Or, more relevantly, an Achilles block, something the villagers needed to find. Their elders, wise but clumsy librarian villagers with spectacles perpetually sliding down their noses, unearthed an ancient manuscript titled The Gliding Scrolls of Roller Rebellion. It was, weirdly enough, an instruction manual for roller skating warfare. The villagers, confused but intrigued, immediately pivoted from swordplay to roller derby tactics. Why fight air when you could roll circles around it? Gordy, now the reluctant captain, was handed the town's most prized possession. A pair of enchanted roller skates crafted from obsidian wheels and enchanted leather straps. They gleamed dangerously, as if whispering secrets of speed and style. The scene cut swiftly to Gordy wobbling across the square, desperately trying to maintain balance. Roller derby, he muttered to himself, definitely less dangerous than Endermen, but also probably just as confusing. The cobblestone rumbled under his clunky wheels, and villagers cheered, their faces pixel-perfect with hope. The training sequences began, with every villager adopting absurd, mismatched protective gear, pumpkin helmets, lily pad pads, and for some reason, a scarecrow's straw jacket that looked like it belonged in a Halloween patch rather than a battlefield. The pitiful clumsiness of their practice was matched only by the Ender Dragon's latest reconnaissance squad zooming overhead, their sharp eyes scanning Villigatopia for signs of weakness. They had no idea what awaited them. The roller derby wasn't just a sport. It was a tactical mind game wrapped in leather laces. Contrary to every Minecraft player's instinct, the villagers trained not to hide, but to flaunt. They practiced pirouettes next to pig farms and leaned into zooming dives over fences, turning their humble village into a dizzying labyrinth of ramps, rails, and pixelated obstacles. Most scenes were punctuated by the coach, an old, ill-tempered villager named Mumble, who communicated mostly through grunts and cryptic phrases like "skate like your wheat depends on it." And during a particularly clumsy fall, that's why you never trust a llama with the gear. His wisdom was vague, but somehow it stuck, probably because nobody else had better ideas. The training montage was both inspiring and absurd. Children rolled past chickens like tiny tornadoes of determination. Elders zipped around with a surprising flair that defied their brittle spines, and Gordy evolved from a skating menace to an accidental blur of confidence. His glorious breakthrough came during a particularly spectacular tumble, when he realized falling fast wasn't failure. It was part of the grand dance of the derby. The villagers hadn't just learned to skate, they'd embraced the glorious chaos of movement itself. At night, as glowing Enderman specters crept silently just beyond the soothing lantern light, the villagers dreamed of the battle to come. Deep in the heart of the village's forge, Gordy pondered the absurdity of it all. War by roller derby, he mused, who'd have guessed. But maybe, just maybe, speed and spin can outwit terror. Outside, the midday sun's cube reflected off obsidian skates like battle standards. The village no longer feeling fragile but electrified with possibility. Meanwhile, in the dragon's imperial floating palace, an enormous fortress of craggy obsidian blocks hovering above the void, a council of snarling Endermen convened. They smirked with purple eyes glowing lazily, thoroughly unconcerned by any uprising. Villagers, hissed the lead Enderman, who went by the fearsome name of ZJZZK, are no match for the Empire's might. The dragon herself will consume their petty rebellion like pixel dust in the wind. Their confidence was nearly as inflated as their blocky heads, but as the villagers' roller derby training intensified, strange things began to happen. The very fabric of the end dimension started to wobble and jitter. Blocky particles scattered wherever Gordy and cohorts practiced their dizzying spins and daring jumps. The chaos of their movement seemed to disrupt the Ender Dragon's eerie stillness, almost like a sonic boom in pixel form, causing Endermen to trip on thin air or glitch into awkward dance moves. One particularly unlucky Enderman was caught mid-teleport in a pose that resembled a breakdance freeze, leaving it forever stuck in a quirky loopback in Villigatopia. The first official Derby War Council gathered, featuring Gordy and his closest allies, Becca, the village baker who wielded reinforced bread shields, and Tim, the redstone engineer who insisted on powering their roller skates with a dubious but electrifying mix of redstone and chicken feathers. The council room resembled a blocky war room built entirely from crafting tables and fences, which worked fine, except for the silence every time Tim's contraptions sparked wildly. "We strike when the Empire least expects it," Becca declared, handing out crumbly cookie-shaped badges that doubled as morale boosters. What nobody knew was that the Ender Dragon herself had been watching, from a safe height above the void, amusement flickering in her enormous purple eyes. Roller derby rebellion, she mused with a crooked dragon smile, sounds charming but pointless. Then, in an uncharacteristic moment of curiosity, or perhaps boredom, she sent a small emissary disguised as a villager to infiltrate the rebellion. Meanwhile, on the village's freshly constructed half-pipe ramp outside the library, villagers held their first full-contact roller derby match, not against each other, but against a giant, oddly-shaped golem made of enchanted cobblestone blocks. The klutzy confrontation was less a fight and more a roller disco spectacular. Gordy, now wearing a shimmering purple visor, made a grand spin and collided with the golem, causing a shower of harmless pixels to scatter. The crowd roared as the golem stumbled, and in a flurry of wildly out-of-sync block claps, surrendered. The villagers celebrated as if they had toppled an empire, the first real blow in the coming war having been a spectacular, if slightly ridiculous, spectacle. Yet just as the village erupted in blocky fireworks, imagine sparkling cubes exploding like digital confetti. A dark shadow stretched across the sky. The Ender Dragon, now somewhat entertained, decided the time had come to test this newfound madness herself. "Prepare your skates," she hissed across the void, "and your courage. Because if you want to dance with the dragon, you better learn to keep up." The villagers' roller derby practice ground crackled with electric anticipation. Gordy tightened his obsidian straps, Becca adjusted her crumb armor, and Tim flicked some redstone sparks nervously. Somewhere, a chicken clucked in what sounded suspiciously like a cheer. The great uprising roller derby was finally moving from chaotic practice to high-stakes reality, and the question on everyone's lips was simple. Could a bunch of blocky villagers on roller skates really outspin the Ender Dragon's empire? Or would they end up flattened like redstone dust under a stomping dragon's claw? Either way, the game had changed forever. The Ender Dragon's empire was supposed to be invincible, like a fortress built from obsidian cubes, impossible to crack. But what happens when a loaf-wielding villager named Bob, whose only official title was Nitwit Extraordinaire, somehow becomes the spearhead of a rebellion that no one expected? The perils of PvP suddenly looked oddly adorable as Bob adjusted his tiny square spectacles and stared at the sprawling Ender fortress looming overhead, glittering under the eerie purple glow of the End's endless sky. This was no ordinary war. This was a battle of unexpected alliances and absurd escalations. Minecraft-style Bob's idea was insane on paper. Unite factions most thought were never meant to share a pixel. Behind him, the village was buzzing, not with the usual potion brewers and farmers, but a hodgepodge ragtag army. Iron golems, their metal fists gleaming and groaning, now wore patched-up armor doctored by redstone engineers wielding handfuls of tinkered pistons. The sheep, so fluffy and unintimidating elsewhere, had been given volunteer helmets, very snug helmets carved from melons, which somehow boosted morale and imagination, if not actual combat capability. Over by the cliff edge, the first unusual alliance took form. Two creepers were having what looked like a heated argument with a skeleton archer named Chuck. Usually, creepers and skeletons exploded or shot arrows at each other in an eternal rat race of one-upmanship. But today, Chuck was explaining a complicated formation strategy involving flanking and cover fire. The creepers looked skeptical, but eventually nodded, though it was hard to tell if this meant yes or get ready to blow up if you screw this up. There was even a terrifying group of Endermen, the very minions of the Ender Dragon itself, who defected. These lanky figures, with their long limbs and gleaming purple eyes, were sashing around nervously. They carried artifacts stolen from the dragon's chambers and whispered frantically to Bob. Why had they betrayed their master? Well, let's just say the Ender Dragon's empire was not without its bureaucratic nightmares. A tyrannical ruler who insisted on endless midnight meetings and block count audits was a fast way to make even minions reconsider loyalties. Bob approached the newly formed war council, gathered inside a massive obsidian tent pitched precariously on the edge of the central island. The atmosphere was tense, but tinged with ridiculousness. Bob flicked his hand toward a redstone contraption that was supposed to be an Ender locator, but mostly just hummed and shot sparks randomly. "We're underestimating one crucial fact," Bob said seriously. "The Ender Dragon's empire has never fought a watermelon-wielding mob before." The rumbling chuckles came from a group of villagers heavily equipped with fruit bludgeons and slingshots. They'd been farming melons especially for this purpose. overheard by the dragon's guards as the secret weapon against fireballs. An ingenious strategy that involved smacking melons onto the dragon's face and hoping it got distracted long enough to miss a breath attack iron golem commander thud. A towering figure made of iron blocks and pumpkin headwear slightly askew, grunted his approval and flexed his metallic limbs. I say we use everything we have. Melons, pistons, arrows, and a little chaotic chaos. His voice was a bass, thudding echo that practically shook the dirt beneath their boots. Then came the most bizarre proposal of all. In the background, hidden behind stacks of enchanted books and suspiciously placed cobblestone traps, a small but fierce chicken named Henrietta strutted forward. She was the unofficial general of the Feathered Frenzy, a battalion of battle-hardened chickens trained in formal pecking maneuvers and aerial distraction tactics. The idea, a feathery airstrike too chaotic to predict Henrietta's plan, is dumb enough to work, Bob mused aloud, and no one dared disagree. As the sun dipped behind the endlessly blocky horizon, casting purple-black shadows across the End's eerie landscape, the first offensive was scheduled. The alliances formed were so unconventional, they almost seemed like a cartoonish Netflix crossover set inside Minecraft itself. The battle began with a bellowing roar, not from a fire-breathing dragon, but from a war drum made of slime blocks and rickety wood. Bob gave the signal. The iron golems surged forward like lumbering juggernauts, the melon-wielding villagers slapping fruit into shields and helmets with frantic determination. Skeleton archers volleyed bursts of arrows propelled from contraptions that resembled one part trebuchet, one part malfunctioning dispenser. The creepers, to everyone's shock, hesitated until Chuck the skeleton shouted, "Now, explode on my mark." The creepers responded by strategically retreating, leaving the ground trembling as they self-detonated behind the dragon's shadow-casting minions. Meanwhile, Henrietta's feathered frenzy fluttered overhead, feathers flying like confetti at a parade, eyes wide and beaks sharp. The chickens harmed no one, but the mass distraction they caused was enough that the dragon's own Endermen guards were bumping disastrously into each other, tripping over blocks, and suffering minor embarrassing glitches that even the most prideful of Endermen struggled to hide. At the center of the clash, Bob found himself face-to-face with a particularly smug Ender Dragon lieutenant, a massive, scaled beast with glowing purple spikes and eyes gleaming like the darkest amethyst. The dragon sneered, claws scraping at the jagged obsidian floor. Bob raised his melon club defensively. The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on him. Here they were, a nitwit villager and an ancient terror, locked in a showdown where the stakes were the survival of all Minecraft, a saga as ridiculous as it was desperate. Then the ground shook violently. It wasn't an attack, it was more absurd chaos. The rogue Endermen defectors, wielding stolen redstone-powered pistons, flipped an enormous lever to launch a surprise siege weapon, a giant slingshot catapulting enormous snowballs. No one had expected the End Castle would be besieged by snowballs, but the unrelenting barrage sent chunks of obsidian and End stone cracking through the air with the most ridiculous thuds. The Ender Dragon roared in frustration, whipping its massive tail and sending a shockwave that scattered villagers and warriors alike. But Bob and his whimsical alliance fought on. Slime blocks bounced explosives into the air, potion-brewing witches mixed confusing clouds, and a brownie-like piglin with a broken shovel slipped past enemy lines to plant a rather conspicuous kick-me sign on a dragon minion's back. As the battle grew ever crazier, alliances frayed but new ones blossomed. Even the Endermen who refused to defect were forced to acknowledge that this unprecedented chaos was bending the laws of Minecraft physics. Like that time a cow wore a pumpkin on its head and suddenly flew 15 blocks into a hay bale eventually. The sky itself seemed to join the madness. The End's endless void shimmered with patches of stochastic lightning, biome glitches, some guessed, electrocuting stray mobs, turning the fight into a bizarre disco light show under the supervision of bewildered elder guardians watching from afar like uninterested judges. The greatest twist came when Bob discovered that the valuable key to winning wasn't more TNT or better enchanted gear, but something far more unexpected. Laughter, not a humorous glitch or a funny distraction, but pure, infectious laughter from the villagers. During a particularly tense moment, a young villager tripped, falling into an accidentally planted patch of chorus fruit. The mishap caused the villager to teleport uncontrollably around the battlefield, everywhere and nowhere at once, confusing friend and foe alike. This chaotic dance triggered peals of laughter that rolled through the blocks, even reaching the Ender Dragon, centuries-old tyrant of the realm, was caught in a rare moment of vulnerability, its perpetually scowling face twitching as it tried, and failed to suppress a sneaky chuckle. Ironically, the Empire had been undone not solely by iron swords or piston cannons, but by the peculiar power of unexpectedly shared foolishness. And so, as the battered armies paused in disbelief, the end of this phase of war hung in the pixelated air, balanced between chaos and order. Bob adjusted his cuba-shaped helmet, wiped a droplet of glue from his melon club, and looked out across the flickering battleground, with one thought echoing louder than all the explosions and chicken clucks combined. Maybe, just maybe, this absurd war would teach even the Ender Dragon Empire one thing Minecraft had always known. Sometimes the weirdest alliances bring the world back from the brink. The war was far from over, but a new plan was already forming in the mind of a nitwit who now led the most motley crew of heroes the blocky world had ever seen. Madness only grew more inventive from here, and the Ender Dragon's empire would soon learn that in Minecraft, absurdity was the deadliest weapon of all. As the purple sky flickered with the last pulses of combat magic, the sense of anticipation thickened. What next? The answer lay shrouded in the glitched shadows, waiting for Bob and his patchwork army's next wild gambit. The sun dipped low over the obsidian towers of the Ender Dragon's empire, casting long, blocky shadows across the jagged terrain. The battle-worn villagers, faces streaked with pixelated grime and determination, stood at the jagged edge of the end portal, their makeshift weapons still smoking from the chaotic clash. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the eerie hiss of Endermen watching from a distance, their eyes glowing like sinister green emeralds in the twilight. Just when it seemed that endless war might be the only chapter in this strange chapter of Minecraft history, a most unexpected idea sparkled into existence like a dropped enchanted diamond. Meet Herobrine, vested, ravishingly disheveled, not entirely understood, and with a penchant for the absurdly diplomatic. With a dramatic flourish of his cape, exactly the color of deep, blocky twilight, he stepped forward into the open, addressing the gathered mobs and villagers alike. Enough with the swordplay and the collapse of villages, he declared, waving a crooked finger that glowed with mysterious white magic. I propose a different battleground, a dance-off. The concept registered slowly, like a zombie trying to decode redstone circuits, then exploded into chaotic excitement. The villagers blinked at each other, eyebrows raised as if to say, dance. Really? With the Ender Dragon? Nearby, Endermen exchanged confusing glances, their long legs twitching involuntarily. The dragon itself, perched majestically on a throne of jagged crystals, gave a slow blink, its wings folding in what could only be called a blocky shrug. A dance battle to decide the fate of factions. Ludicrous. Brilliant. Absolutely endearing Herobrine, knowing a crowd appeal when he saw one, grinned with pixel-perfect teeth. Picture it, the fate of the End Realm decided by rhythm, style, and sick moves. No more fireballs, no more spiky tails, just pure groove cut to the resplendent yet rather dusty village square. At one end, the villagers, adorned with pixelated hats and armor bits, flexed awkwardly. At the other, the Ender Dragon unfurled its massive wings with a wing beat so thunderous it sent a flock of fluttering, blocky pie birds scattering. Yes, pie birds, inexplicably baked villagers shaped like pies. A little known, but beloved Minecraft oddity. The DJ, none other than a red-eyed creeper with custom headphones and a tiny flickering disco ball stuck to its head, dropped a beat that reverberated through the air like TNT in slow-mo. The ground itself seemed to pulse in time, cobblestones vibrating, leaves rustling in syncopation. Villager Jasper took the stage first. Jasper was a lanky blacksmith with wildly improbable facial hair, wispy silver with a hint of charcoal dust. He began with a shuffle that looked like a glitch in the Matrix, shifting side to side with such awkwardness it somehow became mesmerizing. His arms flailed, mixing in improbable jazz hands before transitioning smoothly into a surprisingly competent moonwalk, or at least what Minecraft might call a block walk. The crowd started cheering, pumping pixel fists. Then the Ender Dragon responded. It swirled its tail, the tips glowing purple with Ender energy, syncing beats before it launched into a slow, hypnotic sway punctuated by spinning aerial flips that bent the physics of the blocky realm itself. The end tapped along tricept claws with such rhythmic precision beams of light erupted from the ground with every beat, pure audiovisual spectacle. Even a nearby shulker shyly cracked its box open to reveal a little glittering disco ball Herobrine narrated from the sidelines, voice dripping with faux gravitas. And now, ladies and gentlemen, witness the Ender Dragon's infamous wings of fury funk, known to cause temporary blindness, vertigo, and severe dance envy. This put a ripple of laughter through the crowd, a rare end to the grim proceedings so far. The villagers weren't daunted. In fact, their secret weapon was about to emerge. A tiny, nondescript villager named Midge, barely taller than a block, yet equipped with the moves of a lava-fueled disco inferno. As Herobrine revealed, Midge was the champion dance-off contender of Villageville, known far and wide for her pixel pop lock and Ender drop combo that could make stone statues break into spontaneous boogie. As the beat dropped, Midge blasted off in a flurry of moves so fast the audience could barely track her mini pixelated feet. She spun, popped, and locked in a dizzying cascade of moves, each transition marked by hilarious yet impressive pratfalls and near-miss collisions with invisible barriers of code. With every hop and glide, the end seemed to pulse with newfound energy, as if the entire dimension was cheering her on the Ender Dragon's face, usually a mask of inscrutable ferocity, twitched at the corners in what might have been a dragon-sized smile. It was impossible to say for sure, but the effect was undeniable. The creature was entertained. Hypnotized almost. Battle fatigue forgotten, it started to mimic Midge's moves in a clumsy but earnest attempt at cooperation. And then, the absurd magic of Minecraft worked its little glitches. Villagers and Enders, usually fierce enemies, began mirroring each other's dance steps. Skeletons threw in ballet-style pirouettes, with Endermen fashioning pixel top hats out of nearby obsidian blocks. Creepers and iron golems debated latest dance trends, occasionally exploding into tiny, friendly puffs of confetti instead of TNT blasts. And in this grand mashup, Herobrine saw a spark of something else entirely. Fragile peace. The dance-off was no longer a contest, but a wild, chaotic, joyous celebration of difference. A pixelated party moving to the same heartbeat. The villagers' banner, once symbolizing rebellion, now waved alongside an improvised Ender flag formed from obsidian and enchanted crystals. The message was clear. Coexistence could be as strange, unpredictable, and delightful as a floppy disco dot from above. The clouds began pixelating into abstract shapes, a sign in this world of digital magic that a new era was dawning. As the music wound down, the day's final scene took shape. Jasper and Midge teamed up with an increasingly graceful Ender Dragon, forming a trio of champions representing all realms. Together, they pulled off one last move, a triple pirouette-slide disappearing act that ended with them popping up in the village square, confetti raining from blocky skies. The assembled crowd, Neither Ender nor villager, but simply cuba-shaped beings connected by this moment, broke out into cheers so loud they seemed to shake nearby mountains of stone and dirt. Old grudges forgotten, replaced with laughter echoing into the blocky horizon, Herobrine stepped forward, waving one last time. Who would have thought? The fate of the Ender Dragon's empire decided not by sword, flame, or claw, but by footwork, funky beats, and a willingness to bust a move. He winked knowingly, make peace, Minecraft style. One awkward shuffle at a time, and as twilight deepened, glowing softly over a realm reborn, a placid new reality shimmered into place. The villagers' farms began to sprout alongside shimmering obsidian fields. Endermen politely offered to teleport heavy loads. The Ender Dragon took up a curious pastime, crafting enchanting dance floors. Rumor even spread that creepers tried to become DJs, much to the slightly uneasy chagrin of their old TNT-loving selves. But somewhere, in the darker corners of the cosmos, a whisper of uncertainty lingered. Had the dance-off truly ended conflict, or merely paused it, disguising potentially explosive moves as rhythm and beats? The camera might pan out inevitably, revealing a mysterious hooded figure, part villager, part Enderman, tapping a foot in sync with the fading disco pulse. What new chapter might this strange alliance trigger? Was it peace, or simply the prelude to an even funnier, more absurd confrontation? For now, however, the message was clear and blocky. Sometimes, the greatest weapons are those you least expect, and the impossible can always become hilarious reality in a world made of cubes. And with that, dear viewer, we leave you amidst the pixelated echoes of a lasting dance-off diplomacy. Until the next What If saga unfolds in the endless labyrinth of Minecraft imagination.